Go ahead and open your next lesson in the Civil War called Women Make a Difference. Our objectives for this lesson are to name the women and the roles they played for the North and South during the war. Look at your vocabulary words. To expel or kick out of a place permanently is banish. A major disaster is a catastrophe. A person who frees other people from bondage or slavery is an emancipator. A person who supports a cause is a sympathizer. Okay, it says, I want you to understand before we start this lesson that there are gaps in your text during this lesson. These are actually sections of text written in white to hide the writing. You can read these gaps by holding the left mouse key and highlighting the hidden text. Included in each hidden section are letter codes for you to jot down so you can decipher the message at the end of the lesson. All of this, they added all of this to enhance it and grab your attention, okay? Have you ever wondered what it would be like to spy for the CIA? There seems to be something exotic about the life of a secret agent. Car chases galore. And car chases galore, ending with the good guys winning again. Sometimes you might even get to carry a message written in invisible ink. Are you puzzled by the blank gap between the words in the previous paragraph? Be a spy and highlight it with your mouse to uncover the secret code. Be diligent, and you might find interesting things about some of the women you are about to study. Okay, did you highlight it? If you get your left mouse and you highlight the space between agent and car, you're going to see writing there. That's the secret writing. Okay? The Civil War was not just about men going to battle or fighting it out in the political arena. Women played an important role in this war as well. From writers to spies to doctors and soldiers, women changed the lives of many people and affected the outcome of the war. In today's lesson, you'll learn some of their stories. Imagine the shock. Union soldier Frank Miller had been wounded in battle and left on the field, only to be captured by Southern troops. They took him to have the wound attended to and discovered that Frank was a woman. Her real name was Frances Hook, and she had enlisted along with her brother. A fluke, you might think? Not really. Over the years, there has been a lot of research done on the Civil War, and it has been discovered that as many as 700 women enlisted from both sides. How did this happen, you wonder? What about the physicals all new recruits have to undergo? Back then, the physicals were rarely done very efficiently. The need for soldiers was too high for the military to be picky. Not only did women fight in battle, but some of them became the better-known spies of the war. Others became heroines in surgical hospitals and underground railroads. Okay, so go ahead and write today's date in your lesson on your notes. The South. Okay, we're going to talk about different women, it looks like. First one we're going to talk about is Rose O'Neal Greenhow. So Rose O'Neal Greenhow. Married to a federal government official, Rose Greenhow was able to spy for the Confederacy. She once gave important information to Confederate General Beauregard just prior to the First Battle of Bull Run. Rather than make a martyr out of her, she and her daughter were banished from Washington, D.C. forever. She was given a hero's welcome in Richmond and was sent to Europe to drum up support for the South. After spending nearly 2 years there, she returned to America. Near the North Carolina coast, the ship ran aground in a storm, and she drowned. She received a Confederate military burial in Washington. Okay, so she was on the Confederate side. Okay, she was sent to Europe to drum up support for the South. So she went to Europe to get support for the South, and she drowned. Okay, let's talk about Jenny and Lottie Moon. Jenny and Lottie Moon. These two sisters had grown up in the South and moved to Ohio just before the war began. They hooked up with the Confederate underground there and spent time sending secret dispatches back and forth across the lines. Now there's a blank space there, so go ahead and highlight that between lines and she. Hold down your left mouse and highlight it, and you'll see a message there. She was able to chew up and swallow the papers before being searched. Although captured, neither one ever spent any time in prison. Okay, did you see the secret writing right there? Okay, so she also was for the Confederates. Okay, and what did she do? It says she sent secret dispatches back and forth the lines. So sent secret messages Okay, when she was captured, she swallowed the papers. So she swallowed the papers when captured. I say she, I mean they. Okay. Okay, the next one is Nancy Hart. Let's talk about Nancy Hart. Have you ever heard someone say that a family member was the rebel in the family? In Nancy Hart's case, it was true. Her family supported the North, including two brothers who fought for the Union Army. She was a rebel at heart and served the Confederacy for a long time as a spy. She was also involved in fighting as part of a Southern guerrilla group. Okay, so she also was on the side of the Confederates. It says her brothers fought in the Union Army. Okay, so her brothers were in the Union Army. Right here, I'm going to put Confederate spy, because that's what she was. She was a Confederate spy. Okay? Let's talk about Antonia Ford. Antonia Ford. Here's a story right out of Hollywood. Antonia Ford was a Confederate sympathizer living just a few miles from Washington, D.C., in Fairfax, Virginia. She lived with her parents near the county courthouse. This area saw many troops from both sides coming and going during the war, and her family would house Confederate officers whenever they were there. Okay, so she also helped the Confederates. So far, they all helped the Confederates, huh? And it said that she housed Confederate officers. Housed Confederate officers whenever they were there. Just before the Second Battle of Bull Run in Manassas in the summer of 1861, Union troops were staying at her house as uninvited guests. Okay. So it says, just before the Second Battle of Bull Run, Union officers were staying at her house, uninvited, but putting on the charm, she was able to gather a lot of information about the upcoming battle. Okay. Okay, Union officers stayed at her house. So she got a lot of information about the upcoming battle. She drove a carriage through a rainstorm for more than 15 miles to deliver the information to Confederate General Jeb Stuart. Shortly thereafter, her information led to the capture of a Union general and their officers. This was very embarrassing to the North, to say the least. Okay. So she rode through a rainstorm and gave the information to General Stuart. So she rode through a rainstorm and gave info to General Stuart. Okay, and it says a Union general and other officers were captured. Union general and other officers were captured. And you can't see that word captured. I'll write it up here. Okay. Knowing there was a Confederate spy living in the area, the North sent a spy of their own to catch her. She was eventually caught and put into the old Capitol Prison in Washington, D.C. Okay. She was caught and imprisoned. Into the old Capitol Prison. In old Capitol prison in Washington, D.C. So Antonia Ford was on the Confederate side. She housed Confederate officers whenever they were in town. Well, right before the Second Battle of Bull Run, Union officers stayed at her house. She was able to gather information, and she rode through the rainstorm to give the information to General Stuart. A Union general and officers were captured. She was caught and imprisoned in Old Capitol Prison in Washington, D.C. Right after... Okay. Now remember, there's a blank space there, so highlight it and look at it. Okay, did you read it? Well, she's imprisoned in the Capitol Prison, and while she's there, the Union officer in charge of her while she was in prison, Major Joseph Willard, fell in love with her. Right after his plan succeeded, he proposed to her and they got married, and they ended up having 3 children. So she fell in love with the officer in charge of her while she was in prison. Fell in love and married the officer in charge of her. And his name was Major Joseph Willard. Major Willard. Okay, so we talked about the South. Now let's talk about the North. Clara Barton. You might have heard of Clara Barton. She's the one that sounds familiar to me. If you've heard about any catastrophe in recent times, you have also heard the name the Red Cross. Clara Barton is the one who began the Red Cross in the United States shortly after 1870. Her interest in helping others was born from her work during the Civil War. So wanting to help with the war effort, Clara spent time gathering needed supplies for the Union Army. She had seen that the War Department was not prepared for the many casualties. After securing supplies, she would go to the scene of the battle and help surgeons as they tried to save wounded soldiers. She was in the heat of several battles during the war. In fact, during one battle, she was holding the head of a wounded soldier when she felt a musket ball penetrate the sleeve of her blouse. The same ball killed the soldier she was trying to help. Okay, so Clara Barton was on the Union side. She would gather supplies and help wounded soldiers. Clara Barton worked tirelessly throughout the war, seeing the need for better medical care. After the war, she traveled to Europe and got caught up in the Franco-Prussian War in 1870. She saw the great medical care given to soldiers by a group called the Red Cross and knew this was something America could use. She returned home and began the American Red Cross, staying as its head until 1881. Okay, so Clara Barton started the American Red Cross. Okay, let's talk about Dr. Mary Walker. Flying in the face of conventional thought, Mary Walker chose to be a doctor, which was unheard of in the 1850s. When the Civil War broke out, she tried to enlist in the Union Army, but was denied because she was a woman. Rather than being prevented from helping, she volunteered her time as an assistant to the surgeon. During the course of the war, and there's a blank spot, go ahead and highlight it. She was eventually released during a prisoner exchange and continued serving in the Army hospitals. In 1865, President Andrew Johnson awarded her the Congressional Medal of Honor, the only woman to receive the award. Okay. So she's for the Union. They wouldn't let her enlist as a doctor, so she enlisted as a doctor's assistant. I guess a surgeon's assistant. She enlisted as a surgeon's assistant. Make sure you put the T if you're going to abbreviate that. Okay. President Johnson awarded her the Congressional Medal of Honor. Congressional Medal of Honor. Okay, it says she was the only woman to receive that medal. Okay, Harriet Tubman. Last year, we read the book of Harriet Tubman, so you should know all about Harriet Tubman. Harriet Tubman. Prior to the Civil War, Harriet Tubman was a slave in Maryland. So she was a former slave. She escaped to Philadelphia. She escaped to Philadelphia 10 years before war broke out. She set about the task of setting slaves free and was instrumental in the Underground Railroad before and during the war. Despite having a price on her head as a runaway slave, she made more than 15 trips into Maryland and freed other slaves. In all, she helped about 300 people gain their freedom. She helped 300 gain their freedom. During the war, she worked for the Union Army in any capacity she could. So she's for the Union Army because she's totally against slavery. Working with former slaves, she would spy out Confederate troop movements and report the findings. Due to her work in helping slaves become free, she was known as the Moses of her people. Moses of her people. Remember, Moses is the one that went to Egypt and set the Israelites free. She's the one that went to the south and set the slaves free. Before you go on to the review section, can you figure out what this says based on the clues you were given in this lesson? Okay, when you highlight it, everything that we've highlighted, it gives you a code. See if you can figure out what that code says. Before completing the problem set, make sure you understand the main points of this lesson. Many women were directly involved in the Civil War in different capacity as spies, doctors, soldiers, and emancipators. Frances Hook, also known as Frances Miller, fought as a Union soldier and was wounded in battle. She was one of an estimated 700 women who fought in the war. Rose Greenhow was a Confederate spy who was captured and imprisoned along with her daughter. Claire Barton worked with Union field surgeons during battles and eventually founded the Red Cross in America. Jenny and Lottie Moon were sisters in the North who spied for the Confederacy and who were captured on more than one occasion. Dr. Mary Walker volunteered in the Union Army and helped in a number of battles tending to the wounded. She was eventually awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor. Nancy Hart served in the war as a Confederate spy and fought in a guerrilla group for some time. Harriet Tubman was a runaway slave who spent many years running an underground railroad. She made many trips into Maryland, freeing nearly 300 slaves. Antonia Ford was a Confederate spy who was captured, eventually marrying the Union officer assigned to guard her. Okay, go through and make sure you study that lesson and answer the questions.